I walked into what was supposed to be my inherited house and found strangers unpacking boxes. Grandpa left me his Victorian home in his will. I had the legal documents, but my family sold it behind my back while I was traveling for work, claiming they needed the money more. My mother laughed when I called her crying. "You should have been here to stop it," she said coldly. But they made one critical mistake. They never read Grandpa's backup clause in the fine print. What happened next taught them the most expensive lesson of their lives. I'm Amanda Harris, and this is the story of how my family's greed cost them everything they thought they could steal from me. It started 6 months ago when Grandpa passed away. I was the only one who visited him regularly during his final years. While my older brother Michael was busy climbing the corporate ladder and my sister Jennifer was posting perfect family photos on Instagram, I spent my Sundays with Grandpa in his beautiful Victorian house on Maple Street. That house was magic to me. Built in 1897, it had these incredible stained glass windows that cast rainbow patterns across the hardwood floors when the afternoon sun hit just right. Grandpa would sit in his favorite leather armchair by the bay window, teaching me how to play chess or telling me stories about Great-Grandma Rose, who planted the garden that still bloomed every spring. "Amanda, sweetheart," he'd say, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "This house has seen 4 generations of our family. It holds our memories, our love, our legacy." I remember running my small fingers along the intricate woodwork of the banister as a child, imagining all the hands that had touched it before mine. But even then, I noticed things, like how Michael only visited when he needed money for his latest business venture, or how Jennifer would bring her kids over, letting them run wild through Grandpa's carefully maintained rooms while she complained about how outdated everything looked. "Honestly, Grandpa," she'd sigh dramatically, "you could get so much money if you just sold this old place and moved into a nice retirement community." Grandpa would just smile and wink at me. "Some things are worth more than money, Jenny." The day after the funeral, we all gathered at the lawyer's office for the reading of the will. The office smelled like old leather and coffee, and I sat between Michael and Jennifer, still wearing my black dress from the service. My parents flanked us on either side, Mom clutching her designer purse like a lifeline. "To my beloved granddaughter Amanda," the lawyer read, his voice echoing in the quiet room, "who showed me true love and companionship in my final years, I leave my house at 447 Maple Street, along with all its contents and the adjoining property." The silence that followed was deafening. I felt my heart skip a beat as the words sank in. Me? The house was mine? I looked around the room and saw Michael's jaw tighten, Jennifer's perfectly manicured nails digging into her husband's arm, and Mom's face go pale. "What about the rest of us?" Michael finally spoke, his voice tight with controlled anger. "We're his family, too." The lawyer cleared his throat. "Mr. Harris left specific instructions. The house goes to Amanda. The remaining assets, his savings, investments, and personal items, are to be divided equally among all grandchildren." That should have been the end of it. I walked out of that office feeling overwhelmed but grateful, clutching the deed to my inheritance. The house was worth approximately $750,000, by far the largest asset in Grandpa's estate. Everyone else would split about $200,000 worth of remaining assets. But the congratulations I expected never came. Instead, on the drive home, Mom turned around from the passenger seat with a forced smile. "Well, honey, that's quite a surprise, but you know, it's really too much house for just one person, don't you think?" "Mom, I started. "I mean," she continued, "it would be the loving thing to do to sell it and split the money with your brother and sister. Family should share, after all." Michael nodded enthusiastically from the driver's seat. "Absolutely. I could really use my share right now. Sarah and I are looking at houses in the suburbs, and with 3 kids, we need something bigger." Jennifer chimed in from beside me. "And David just lost his job. We're barely making our mortgage payments. Grandpa would want us all to be taken care of, wouldn't he?" I felt my stomach twist. "But he left it to me specifically. There has to be a reason." "Oh, sweetie." Mom's voice took on that patronizing tone I remembered from childhood. "You know how Grandpa was in his final years. His mind wasn't quite what it used to be. He probably just didn't think it through properly. That was the first lie. Grandpa's mind had been sharp as a tack right up until the end, but I was still grieving, still processing the magnitude of what had just happened. So I just nodded and said I needed time to think. Over the next few weeks, the pressure intensified. Every family gathering became an intervention. Every phone call became a negotiation. "Amanda, be reasonable," Michael would say during our weekly family dinners. "You're single. You rent that tiny apartment downtown. What do you need with a huge old house? The property taxes alone will eat you alive." Jennifer would nod along, adding, "Plus, think about the maintenance. Those old houses are money pits. The roof probably needs work. The plumbing is ancient, and don't even get me started on the electrical. You'd be house poor within a year." Dad, who usually stayed quiet during these discussions, would occasionally chime in with seemingly helpful suggestions. "Maybe we could just sell it and you could use your share as a down payment on something more practical." But it was Mom who really turned up the heat. She started with guilt trips about family unity, then moved on to subtle threats about being cut off from family events if I didn't do the right thing. When that didn't work, she got nastier. "You know, Amanda," she said one evening as we stood in Grandpa's kitchen after another family dinner, "I'm starting to wonder if this inheritance is changing you. You're becoming selfish. Grandpa raised you better than that." I felt tears prick my eyes. "Mom, how am I being selfish? I haven't even decided what to do yet." "Haven't you?" Her voice was ice cold. "Because it seems pretty clear to me that you've made up your mind to keep everything for yourself while your brother and sister struggle. That's not the Amanda I raised." The gaslighting was subtle but relentless. They made me question everything: my memory of Grandpa's intentions, my understanding of family loyalty, even my own character. Was I being selfish? Was I really the horrible person they were making me feel like? I started having panic attacks. I'd wake up at 3 a.m., my heart racing, wondering if I was destroying my family over money. Maybe they were right. Maybe I should just sell the house and split the proceeds. At least then, everyone would be happy with me again. But every time I walked through those rooms, touching the walls Grandpa had lovingly maintained, sitting in the garden where he'd taught me to identify different flowers, I felt his presence. This house wasn't just real estate. It was 4 generations of family history. It was the place where he'd held me when I cried about my first heartbreak, where we'd baked Christmas cookies every December, where he'd told me I was special and loved. Still, the pressure was wearing me down. I found myself avoiding family calls, making excuses to skip dinners. When I did show up, the atmosphere was thick with tension and unspoken resentment. Then my boss offered me a promotion that required 3 weeks of training in Chicago. I jumped at the chance, thinking maybe some distance would help me gain perspective and give my family time to cool down. "I think this trip will be good for everyone," I told Mom the night before I left. "When I get back, we can all sit down and discuss this rationally." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Of course, dear. Take all the time you need. We'll be here when you get back." I should have known that smile was dangerous. The 3 weeks in Chicago were exactly what I needed. Away from the constant pressure and manipulation, I could think clearly for the first time since Grandpa died. I took long walks along Lake Michigan, called old friends, and slowly started to remember who I was before my family made me doubt everything. I realized that Grandpa had chosen me for a reason. I was the one who'd cared for him, who'd listened to his stories, who'd appreciated the history and beauty of that house. He knew my siblings saw it only as a dollar sign, but I saw it as a home. By the end of my trip, I'd made my decision. I was going to keep the house. I'd move in, fix it up, and honor Grandpa's memory by taking care of the legacy he'd entrusted to me. I was so excited about my decision that I decided to surprise everyone by going straight to the house from the airport instead of calling first. I wanted to walk through those rooms one more time as the official owner, to start planning how I'd make it my home. I pulled up to 447 Maple Street just as the sun was setting, casting that familiar golden glow across the front porch. But something was wrong. There was a moving truck in the driveway, strange cars parked on the street. The front door was propped open, and I could see people carrying boxes and furniture. My heart started pounding as I grabbed my suitcase and ran up the front steps. In the foyer, my foyer, a middle-aged couple was directing movers carrying in a modern sofa that looked completely out of place against the Victorian architecture. "Excuse me," I said, my voice shaking. "What's going on here? This is my house." The woman turned around, looking confused. "I'm sorry, but there must be some mistake. We just bought this house. We have the paperwork and everything." "That's impossible," I said, feeling dizzy. "I inherited this house. I have the deed." The man stepped forward, pulling out his phone. "Let me call our realtor. Maybe there's been some confusion." While he made the call, I stumbled through the rooms in a daze. Strangers were unpacking their belongings in Grandpa's kitchen. Children were running up the stairs where I'd played as a little girl. Someone had already taken down the family photos that had lined the hallway for decades. "Ma'am?" The woman touched my arm gently. "Our realtor says the house was sold by the Harris family 2 weeks ago. Are you related to them?" I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. 2 weeks ago, I'd been in Chicago, trusting my family to respect my inheritance while I was away. Instead, they'd sold it out from under me. With trembling fingers, I called my mother. "Amanda!" Her voice was bright and cheerful, as if nothing had happened. "How was your trip, honey?" "Mom," I whispered, "there are people in Grandpa's house. They say they bought it. What did you do?" The silence stretched for what felt like forever. Then, her voice changed completely. Gone was any pretense of warmth or maternal concern. "We did what needed to be done," she said coldly. "You were being unreasonable, and we have bills to pay. Michael handled all the paperwork as executor of the estate." "But I inherited that house. You had no right." "We had every right," she snapped. "We're family, and family takes care of each other. You would have learned that eventually. Now stop being dramatic and come home. Your share of the money is waiting for you." "My share?" I felt like I was falling into an abyss. "It was my house." Mom's laugh was like ice water in my veins. "It was the family's house, Amanda. Just because Grandpa was sentimental in his old age doesn't mean we had to honor his confused wishes. You should have been here to stop it if you cared so much." The line went dead. I stood there in the foyer, surrounded by strangers and their belongings, feeling like my entire world had collapsed. The family I'd loved and trusted had betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible. They'd stolen not just my inheritance, but Grandpa's legacy, our family history, everything that had mattered to him. The new owners were kind. They let me sit on the front porch for a while, processing what had happened. The woman even brought me a glass of water and asked if I needed them to call someone for me. But who could I call? My family had made it clear where they stood. I had no one. I drove home to my apartment in a fog, barely seeing the road through my tears. For 3 days, I didn't eat, didn't shower, didn't leave my bed. I ignored the calls from my family, the texts asking when I was coming to pick up my share of the money. My share. As if $200,000 could replace what they'd stolen from me. As if money could compensate for the betrayal, for the loss of everything Grandpa had wanted me to have. I felt like I was drowning in grief and rage and disbelief. How could they do this to me? How could the people who were supposed to love me most treat me like I was nothing, like my feelings, my inheritance, my relationship with Grandpa didn't matter at all? On the 4th day, I finally dragged myself out of bed and called in sick to work. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the legal documents that proved the house was mine, wondering if there was any point in fighting. They'd made their position clear. I was the selfish one, the unreasonable one, the one who was destroying the family. Maybe they were right. Maybe I should just take the money and try to move on. Maybe fighting would only make everything worse. But then I remembered Grandpa's words from that last conversation we'd had before he went into the hospital. "Amanda, sweetheart, never let anyone convince you that you're worth less than you know you are. Some people will try to make you small so they can feel big. Don't let them." I picked up my phone and called the lawyer who'd read the will. "Mr. Patterson, this is Amanda Harris. I need your help. My family sold my inherited house while I was out of town, and I need to know what my options are." There was a pause. "Amanda, I'm so sorry to hear that. Can you come in this afternoon? There are some things about your grandfather's will that I think you need to know. Some things I needed to know? What did that mean? As I hung up the phone, I felt something shift inside me. The crushing despair was still there, but underneath it, something else was growing. Something that felt like determination. Maybe I wasn't as powerless as they thought I was. Maybe Grandpa had been smarter than any of us realized. Maybe this wasn't over yet. Mr. Patterson's office looked exactly the same as it had 6 months ago, but I felt like a completely different person walking through those doors. The grief-stricken, overwhelmed woman who'd sat in that leather chair during the will reading was gone. In her place sat someone who'd been betrayed, broken down, and was now ready to fight back. "Amanda," Mr. Patterson said, gesturing for me to sit, "I'm truly sorry about what your family did. But before we discuss your legal options, there's something your grandfather specifically asked me to share with you if this exact situation ever arose." My heart stopped. He knew this would happen? The elderly lawyer opened a thick file and pulled out a document I'd never seen before. "Your grandfather was a very wise man, and he knew his family well. He came to see me 3 months before he passed away, very concerned about what might happen to his house after he was gone." He handed me the document and I stared at it in confusion. It was covered in legal language I couldn't understand, but I could see my name highlighted in several places. "Amanda, this is a codicil to your grandfather's will, an amendment he added specifically to protect you. He called it his backup plan." "What does it say?" I whispered. Mr. Patterson leaned forward, his expression serious. "It says that if the house at 447 Maple Street is sold without your written consent within 2 years of your inheritance, the sale is legally void. The property automatically reverts to you, and whoever sold it is liable for all financial damages, including returning the purchase price to the buyers and covering all legal fees." I felt like I'd been struck by lightning. "Are you saying the sale was illegal?" "Completely illegal. Your grandfather anticipated exactly what happened. He knew your family might try to pressure you or, worse, go behind your back. So he created this safeguard." Tears started streaming down my face, but for the first time in weeks, they weren't tears of despair. "He really did protect me." "There's more," Mr. Patterson continued. "Your grandfather left a letter for you, to be opened only if this situation occurred." He handed me an envelope with my name written in Grandpa's familiar handwriting. With shaking hands, I opened it and began to read. "My dearest Amanda, if you're reading this, then I was right about what your family would do. I'm so sorry you had to go through this pain, sweetheart. But I want you to know that you're not alone. I've watched your siblings and parents for years, and I've seen how they treat you. You give, and they take and take, but they never see your worth. They see you as the easy one, the one who won't fight back. But I see the strength in you that they're too selfish to recognize. This house isn't just wood and stone, Amanda. It's a symbol of everything our family should be: love, loyalty, respect, and taking care of each other. Your great-grandmother Rose built the garden to teach her children about nurturing and patience. Your great-grandfather built the workshop to teach them about hard work and craftsmanship. I've maintained every inch of this house to teach the lesson that some things are worth preserving, but your siblings only see dollar signs. Your parents only see a way to make everyone equal instead of honoring what someone has earned. They've forgotten that love isn't about money. It's about showing up, caring, and being there when someone needs you. You showed up for me, Amanda. Every Sunday for 5 years, through your busy schedule, through bad weather, through your own heartbreaks and challenges, you listened to my stories, played chess with an old man, and made me feel like I mattered. That's love. That's what family should be. I'm giving you the tools to fight back because I want you to learn something important. You are worth fighting for. Your happiness matters. Your inheritance matters. And sometimes, the people who claim to love us the most are the ones who need to face consequences for their actions. Use this backup plan, sweetheart. Get your house back. And don't you dare feel guilty about it. They made their choice when they betrayed your trust. Now you make yours. I love you always, Grandpa." I was sobbing by the time I finished reading. Mr. Patterson quietly handed me a box of tissues and waited while I composed myself. "What do I need to do?" I finally asked. "We file an emergency injunction to void the sale and restore the property to you. Given the clear legal framework your grandfather established, this should be straightforward. But I need to warn you, your family isn't going to be happy about this." I thought about my mother's cold laughter, about Michael's entitled demands, about Jennifer's manipulation. I thought about how they'd made me question my own worth, my own memories, my own right to what Grandpa had given me. "Good," I said firmly. "Let them be unhappy. File the paperwork." The next 48 hours were a whirlwind. Mr. Patterson moved quickly, filing all the necessary documents and serving notice to my family that the sale was being challenged. He also had to notify the innocent buyers who'd purchased the house in good faith. I was at work when my phone started exploding with calls and texts. First Michael, then Jennifer, then Mom and Dad. I ignored them all, but I could see the messages accumulating. Michael: "What the hell do you think you're doing? Call me now." Jennifer: "Amanda, this is insane. You're destroying our family over a house. Call me." Mom: "I can't believe you would be this vindictive. Your father and I are heartbroken." Dad: "Please reconsider what you're doing. This isn't what Grandpa would have wanted." That last text made me laugh bitterly. Dad wasn't wrong. Grandpa wouldn't have wanted this situation. He would have wanted his family to respect his wishes and treat each other with love and dignity. But since they'd chosen a different path, he'd made sure I had the tools to protect myself. On Friday afternoon, Mr. Patterson called with an update. "The court has granted the emergency injunction. The sale is officially voided, and the property is being restored to you immediately. The family who bought the house will be compensated by whoever sold it illegally, namely, your brother, Michael." What does that mean exactly? It means Michael, as the person who signed the sale documents, is personally liable for returning their money, covering their moving expenses, temporary housing costs, and legal fees. We're talking about approximately $850,000 in total damages. I felt a moment of shock. That was more money than Michael had, more than any of them had. But then I remembered how they'd laughed about my tears, how they'd told me I should have been there to stop them, how they'd treated me like I was nothing. "And there's something else," Mr. Patterson continued. "The new owners are understandably upset about this situation. They're considering filing their own lawsuit against your family for misrepresentation and emotional distress." That evening, I drove to 447 Maple Street for the first time as its legal owner. The moving trucks were gone, the strangers were gone, and the house stood empty and waiting for me. I used my key, the one Grandpa had given me years ago, to open the front door. The house felt different now, violated somehow. But as I walked through the rooms, I could feel Grandpa's presence again. This was mine. This was home. And no one could ever take it away from me again. My phone rang as I stood in the kitchen. It was Michael. "Amanda, we need to talk. Now." "I don't think we do," I said calmly. "Do you have any idea what you've done? I'm facing bankruptcy because of your selfishness. Sarah is threatening to leave me. The kids are asking why we have to sell our house." I felt a flicker of the old guilt, but then I remembered Grandpa's letter. "You did this to yourself, Michael. You stole my house and sold it illegally. These are the consequences of your actions." "It was just a house, Amanda. We're family. Family should matter more than property." "You're right," I said quietly. "Family should matter more than property. So why did you destroy our family to steal mine?" "We didn't destroy anything. We were trying to help everyone. You were being unreasonable, keeping everything for yourself while the rest of us struggled." "Michael, you make 6 figures. Jennifer and David own a 4-bedroom house in the suburbs. Mom and Dad are retired with a comfortable pension. Meanwhile, I'm a single woman living in a 1-bedroom apartment, making less money than any of you. Who exactly was struggling?" The silence stretched between us. Finally, Michael's voice came back, colder now. "So this is it? You're really going to let your own brother lose everything over this?" "I'm not letting you lose anything. You chose to steal from me, and now you're facing the consequences. If you lose everything, it's because of choices you made. We'll see about that, he said, and the line went dead. Over the next week, the full scope of the legal and financial fallout became clear. Michael was indeed facing potential bankruptcy. The legal fees alone were going to cost him over $100,000, and that was before the damages to the innocent buyers. Jennifer and David, who had received a portion of the illegal sale proceeds, were also being held liable for restitution. But the family consequences were even more dramatic. Sarah, Michael's wife, filed for separation after learning the full extent of what he'd done. She couldn't believe he'd stolen from his own sister and put their family's financial security at risk for what she called pure greed. Jennifer tried a different approach. She showed up at my apartment on a rainy Thursday evening, tears streaming down her face. "Amanda, please," she begged. David and I made a mistake. We were desperate about his job situation, and when Michael said you'd agreed to sell, we believed him. We didn't know he was lying. I studied my sister's face, looking for any sign of genuine remorse. "When exactly did Michael tell you I'd agreed?" Jennifer shifted uncomfortably. "Well, he said you'd come around eventually, that you just needed time to see reason. So you knew I hadn't actually agreed. You all decided to sell my house and worry about my consent later." "It wasn't like that." "Jennifer, stop." I held up my hand. "Just stop lying. I know exactly how it was because I lived through it. You all spent months pressuring me, manipulating me, trying to make me feel guilty for keeping what Grandpa left me. When I didn't break, you decided to just take it anyway." She was crying harder now. "We're going to lose our house, Amanda. Our kids are going to have to change schools. David can't find work, and now with these legal fees." I felt that familiar tug of guilt, the same feeling that had made me doubt myself for months. But Grandpa's voice echoed in my mind. "Sometimes the people who claim to love us the most are the ones who need to face consequences for their actions." "I'm sorry you're in a difficult situation," I said carefully. "But these consequences aren't coming from me. They're coming from the choices you made." "So you won't drop the case? Even for your nieces and nephews?" And there it was, the final manipulation. Use the children as emotional leverage. Make me responsible for their suffering instead of holding their parents accountable for creating the situation. Jennifer, your children are suffering because their parents chose to commit fraud, not because I chose to reclaim what was stolen from me. If you want to protect them, maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to steal their aunt's inheritance. She left without another word. The court case was surprisingly swift. With Grandpa's codicil and the clear evidence of unauthorized sale, there was no legal question about the outcome. The judge ruled entirely in my favor and issued a sharp rebuke to my family for what he called a callous betrayal of family trust and a clear violation of property law. Michael was ordered to pay full restitution to the buyers, along with legal fees and punitive damages. The total came to just over $900,000. Jennifer and my parents, as recipients of proceeds from the illegal sale, were also held liable for portions of the restitution. But perhaps more importantly, the case made local news. "Family sells inherited house without owner's permission, faces massive lawsuit," read the headline in our hometown paper. The story detailed how a grieving granddaughter had been betrayed by her own family while she was out of town for work. The community response was swift and harsh. People had known and respected Grandpa, and they were outraged by what his children and grandchildren had done. Michael and Jennifer found themselves social pariahs overnight. Michael's business suffered as clients canceled contracts. Jennifer's children faced awkward questions at school about why their parents were in the newspaper for stealing. 6 months later, I was finally able to move into my house. I spent weeks going through Grandpa's belongings, carefully preserving the things that mattered and donating items to families who could use them. I found old photo albums documenting 4 generations of family history, love letters between my great-grandparents, and Grandpa's journals detailing his hopes and dreams for each room of the house. In the basement workshop, I discovered something that made me cry, a half-finished rocking chair with a note attached. "For Amanda's future children," it read in Grandpa's handwriting. "Every family needs something built with love." I hired contractors to update the electrical and plumbing while preserving the historical character of the house. I planted new flowers in Great-Grandma Rose's garden and learned to maintain the fruit trees Grandpa had tended so carefully. Slowly, the house began to feel like home again. My neighbors, the Johnsons, became like family to me. Mrs. Johnson brought me homemade soup when I was sick, and Mr. Johnson helped me learn to maintain the old heating system. They'd known Grandpa well and often shared stories about his generosity and kindness. "He'd be so proud of you, dear," Mrs. Johnson told me one afternoon as we sat on the front porch watching the sunset. "He always said you had strength you didn't know about yet. Guess he was right." I started a support group for people dealing with family financial abuse and manipulation. It turns out there are more of us than you might think. People whose families see them as ATMs rather than human beings. People who've been gaslit into believing they're selfish for wanting to keep what's rightfully theirs. Through this work, I learned that what happened to me wasn't uncommon. Elder abuse, inheritance theft, and family financial manipulation happen every day. But most people don't have the legal protections Grandpa had built into his will. Most people have to choose between their family relationships and their financial security. I was lucky. Grandpa had loved me enough to anticipate exactly what would happen and prepare for it. He'd given me both the tools to fight back and the emotional permission to use them. As for my original family, the consequences were severe and lasting. Michael did file for bankruptcy and lost the house he'd been so eager to upgrade. Sarah divorced him and moved back to her parents' house with the children. The last I heard, he was working in a call center and living in a studio apartment. Jennifer and David managed to avoid bankruptcy, but barely. They had to sell their house and move into a small rental. David eventually found work, but the legal fees and restitution payments meant they'd be struggling financially for years. My parents, who had received the smallest portion of the illegal proceeds, faced the lightest financial consequences. But the social consequences were harder for them to bear. Their friends and neighbors knew what they'd done, and they found themselves increasingly isolated. Mom's church circle began treating her coolly after the story broke. About a year after the court case ended, Mom called me. It was the first time any of them had tried to contact me since the legal proceedings began. "Amanda," she said quietly, "I want you to know that I think we made a mistake." I almost laughed. A mistake? As if stealing my house and destroying our family had been an accidental misstep rather than a calculated betrayal. "Okay," I said neutrally. "I was hoping maybe we could try to rebuild our relationship. I miss you." I thought about all the ways I could respond. I could tell her how much she'd hurt me, how her coldness and manipulation had nearly broken me. I could explain how her actions had taught me that I couldn't trust her love or loyalty. I could detail exactly how she'd destroyed not just my faith in our family, but my ability to trust my own perceptions and feelings. Instead, I said simply, "I'm not ready for that." "Will you ever be ready?" I looked around the living room where Grandpa and I had spent so many Sunday afternoons, where he'd taught me to see my own worth even when others didn't. "I don't know, Mom, but I know that if it ever happens, it will be because you've genuinely understood what you did wrong and made real changes, not because you miss having someone to manipulate." She hung up without saying goodbye. That was 2 years ago. I still live in Grandpa's house, my house now. I've turned his study into my office, where I work remotely and run my support group. The garden blooms more beautifully each year, and I've learned to make the Christmas cookies exactly the way Grandpa taught me. Sometimes I wonder if I'm lonely living in this big house by myself. But then I remember what loneliness really felt like, sitting in a room full of family members who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to their financial goals. This isn't loneliness, this is peace. I've built a new family of choice, neighbors who care about me, friends who support me, and the people in my support group who understand what it means to be betrayed by the people who were supposed to love you most. These relationships are built on mutual respect and genuine affection, not obligation and manipulation. And every evening, when I sit in Grandpa's old chair by the bay window and watch the light play through the stained glass, I can feel his presence. He kept his promise. He protected me, even from beyond the grave. The backup plan worked perfectly. Not just the legal protection, but the emotional lesson it taught me. I am worth fighting for. My happiness matters. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable people who want to harm you. They thought they could steal my inheritance and get away with it because I was the easy one, the one who wouldn't fight back. They were wrong, and that was the most expensive lesson they ever learned.